Now, we are sure that the information that we have defined in a JSON file is actually being picked up by Postman and used in the request. But still, it would be nice to have all the tests working as they used to work. So let's go back to Postman and fix them. So going to the test tab, you will see here that now we have these hard-coded values. And you're probably wondering, well, how can I access this information that now Postman has from this external file? How can I make it work here? And the way you can access data variables, because what we have used so far are data variables, you can use pm.iterationData.get, and then you will have to input the name of that variable. So in this case, we have customer ID. And the same goes for product ID. I'm going to save it. Now going back in the production run, I do not have to start the collection run every time, but I must make sure that when I'm using data files, I don't hit this retry button here, because this will definitely not work in the latest version of Postman that is at the time of this tutorial. So what I will do in this case, I'm going to go back to the collection runner, and you will see here I still have all the information pre-filled in my case. So I have these 3 iterations, and I'm going to run the collection again. Now you'll see that now everything works properly. Let's go back to Postman and try to make this even more complicated. Let's have a look at this request, check status. What happens a lot is that you send some data with your request, but not all the time you make the same expectation. What happens if you need to test like a positive scenario and a negative scenario? So for example, if I'm inputting here for 404 as a status, I will get back a different status code and my test will fail. So let's have a look on how we can sync this information as well, so that what you're sending as a data can be checked in the test as well. Now going back to the JSON file, let's add the following information. So we'll say, for example, when status is 200, the status that I expect is 200. So I'll have status 200 and the expected status would be 200. The same goes for the next example. If I send the status 500, I expect that the status will be 500. And in the last case, let's put something else, something that where the input is different from the status that we expect. So for example, when we send something like foo, and it will be a string, we actually expect that the status will be 400. And this is exactly what we're looking for. Not always the inputs result in the same outputs, and this allows us to define a status and expected status. So let's see how we can use that. So in Postman, it will be quite easy. So I'm inputting here the data variable status, and I'm getting as a iteration data the expected status. So let's run this collection again. And you will see now that the status code is being checked as well. Now, of course, this is still hard-coded to 200. I can change that as well. And now it is checking that the status is 200. Now it's checking that the status code is 500, and so on. So I have the possibility to define different data sets and different expectations. One more expectation I wanted to show you is in this case. So what happens here in the creator order if I input some rubbish, some data that really doesn't make any sense? Now we have added here a different product ID, something that shouldn't be valid. So instead of a number, I made it a string, and now it is like 3 foo, something that wouldn't work with this API. So let's run the collection again and see what happens. Now you will see that some tests now have failed, and especially the create order test for the third iteration, they do not have this information. So all the tests fail because what we have submitted is actually wrong. So what we want to do is to change the test, because in this case, it is fine that these tests fail, but we do not want to make the entire collection fail because we tested some bad data. So let's find a way to get around this. And in order to do that, we'll define another variable here. Let's call it isValid. And for this case, we're gonna say isValid is false. But for the other cases, isValid will have the value true. And inside the test in Postman, we'll have to do some changes. Now we can no longer make these 3 assertions the way they are right now. So what we will do is we're gonna check the variable isValid. We're gonna say if isValid, then you should execute this block of tests. Because we expect them to be valid. And otherwise, we can do it in an else block. We can say something like pm test should not be valid. And we're going to make the expectation that pm.expect, and in this case, response.json should be null. So this is the expectation that we make in the case that we know that the iteration data is not valid anyway. So now all the tests run perfectly. We expect now that this data set is not valid, and for that reason we are not executing these assertions, but only this. So this is how we can signalize in our data files if a certain assertion should be executed or not. And this is a very simple example on how we can work around it.